They're characterized as obstacles to success. 4 key patterns that happen in the workplace, influencing how women are perceived, how they compete, and how they perform. Well, joining us now for more from San Francisco, California, Joan C. Williams, Director of the Center for Work-Life Law at the University of California. Joan's also the co-author of What Works for Women at Work, 4 Patterns Working Women Need to Know. Joan, welcome to the program. Nice to have you here.
Delighted to be here.
Well, you wrote a book called Unbending Gender 15 years ago in 2000. And at that time, it outlined what you saw on the ground, which was that workplaces are designed around male experiences and life patterns. So I'm wondering, 15 years on, have we seen changes for the better?
You know, I've actually stopped working on work-life issues for professionals because I actually don't see changes for the better. In Unbending Gender, I talked about the ideal worker as someone who starts to work in early adulthood and works full-time, full force for 40 years without a break, taking no time off for childbearing, or really anything else. And I don't think that's changed much. So I actually decided that it was easier to work on gender bias in the workplace than it was to work on work-life issues, which is why I wrote this book with my daughter about gender bias in the workplace.
Well, I want to ask you about working with your daughter. The book's called What Works for Women at Work. It must have been neat to work with your daughter elbow to elbow, but why was it important for you to write a book with her?
Well, I wanted to write a book about how to navigate successfully through subtle gender bias. And I thought it was really important for a woman of a certain age, mine, to be writing this with a much younger woman, because very often women of my age, when they give advice, we give advice to younger women that falls on deaf ears because our experiences are so different from theirs. And thank the Lord. I mean, that just shows what kind of progress there's been. But it's sometimes hard for women my age to kind of bridge that gap.
And when you and your daughter are sitting around and talking about work and workplaces, I mean, can you give me an example of where you guys parted ways, where things look so different from your own experience to hers?
Well, I also should add that I just hired the best writer I could for the book, and that happened to be my daughter. We had a pattern of conflicts that is very, very standard and very, very common. When I was coming up, women professionals my age, we did everything the men did exactly like the men did it, you know, in heels and backwards. That was our strategy. That was really the only deal on offer for us. And Rachel, who is now in her 3rd year of law school, so she's in her 20s, they're not interested in doing what we did, which was basically assimilating to the way that men traditionally have done things. What's happened is that a much broader range of women now is entering these highly skilled professions, and often they value the way women have traditionally done things, and they value traditional femininity in ways that we didn't. My generation, typically we wanted to distance ourselves from traditional femininity because that was the only formula for success. So I call this the fight between the Femmes and the Tomboys. I'm very much a tomboy, just the way the guys did, just watch me. You say I can't do it, just watch me. And Rachel is much more femmy. She's much more traditionally feminine. I mean, she's ambitious and bright as a whip, but she's much more traditionally feminine than I ever was at her age.
Okay, but together you two came up with these 4 patterns working women need to know. You identify these, so I want to go through them with you. The first one is how do women have to prove it again and again? And I could probably go on and say 4 more agains.
Yes. Yes, we call this prove it again. It stems from the fact that if you think about the brilliant, you know, TV presenter, most people will think about a man, and that's true of, you name it, high status job. And so women have to provide more evidence of competence than men. Men tend to be judged, for example, on their potential. No, women are judged just on what they've achieved. Women's mistakes tend to be noticed more and remembered longer. And their successes are often attributed to luck. This is called the he's skilled, she's lucky pattern. In addition, objective rules often are applied rigorously to women but leniently to men. And so all of that is an invisible escalator for men and sort of a headwinds that tends to hold women back.
Okay, I want to read you something. Karen Snyder wrote in Forbes. She analyzed the language of 248 performance reviews from 180 people. 105 of them were men, 75 were women. And the reviews came from 28 different companies in the tech sector. And so negative personality reviews such as, you can come across as abrasive sometimes. I know you don't mean to, but you need to pay attention to your tone. Those show up in 71 of the 94 critical reviews for women. They only show up twice in the 83 critical reviews of men. So with that in mind, Joan, I want to go to your second point and your second pattern, which is this tightrope that women have to walk. What is the tightrope?
The tightrope is that for these high-powered jobs, success is defined as having masculine qualities, being ambitious, commanding, no nonsense, direct. Only problem is that women are expected to be feminine. So women walk a tightrope between being seen as too masculine to be competent or too feminine to be likable, often called the likability competence trade-off. And you're dead right to pick up that study of performance evaluations. One of them said, you need to step back and sometimes and let others shine. In other words, ambition is unseemly in a woman. If you're ambitious and you've got the answer, you need to not say it. That's actually not a formula for career success. What they're saying is that a man can act like that, but a woman, she's supposed to be modest and self-effacing. Of course, the studies show that people who hide their light under a bushel don't get ahead. That's the tightrope that women have to walk.
Okay, so it's like a balancing act. And one of the people that you point out in your book who have done this well is Hillary Clinton.
Well, Hillary Clinton has done it sometimes well and sometimes very poorly. She's learned a lot. Actually, one of the highest polling numbers that Hillary Clinton ever got was when she actually cried in, I think it was in New Hampshire, and when she stood by her man when Bill was misbehaving. So what she was doing, she has had a lot of pushback for being seen as sort of like, what a witch. She's, you know, far too hard driving to be a good woman. And so when she softens and behaves in feminine ways, then people often feel more comfortable with her. That's what I actually call gender judo. Gender judo is when you do a masculine thing in a feminine way. So for example, a CEO said, be warm, Ms. Mother, 95% of the time, so that the 5% of the time when you need to be tough, you can be. So you notice how she was doing a masculine thing, being a CEO, but in a feminine way, using that feminine stereotype that often holds women back, the office mom, but flipping it around to propel herself forward. That's gender judo.
Your book has lots of stats in it. I'm a mom of 3 young kids, and one that stuck with me was this stat that women with children are 79% less likely to be hired than are similarly qualified women without children. And then men with children are more likely to be given a promotion or pay increase. I'm asking, personally and professionally, Joan, why is this happening?
Well, women are half as likely to be promoted as other women with identical resumes, but without children. Motherhood triggers very, very strong negative competence and commitment assumptions of like, well, now she's a mom, she doesn't want this hard driving job, she just kind of wants to stay at home or to step it back. So that's one of the issues that mothers face. The other is if they are hard driving, often they are disliked and held to higher performance standards, interestingly enough, by other women, not so much by men, but by other women. This is what psychologists call identity threat, of like, well, if she can do it all, she must be a bad mother. Otherwise, what am I? I'm a loser. I'm not able to do everything that she's. And so this is called the maternal wall. And the maternal wall is an order of magnitude larger than the kinds of glass ceiling biases we were talking about, the tightrope and prove it again. The maternal wall for mothers is very strong.
Okay, we only got a couple of minutes left, Joan. I'd love to talk to you about the maternal wall for ages and get your advice, but maybe I'll call you after the show. I do want to talk about the last pattern you identify, and that is the tug of war. What is the tug of war?
The tug of war is when gender bias against women fuels conflicts among women. And I just gave one example. It's the mommy wars. Often women my age look at younger women and say, you know, I don't know why you need that long leave or to go part-time. I worked full-time and my kids are fine. Again, this is sort of identity threat stuff. But one of the important things about the book is that we not only describe these patterns, we give women very concrete strategies for how to navigate successfully through them. For example, if you come back from maternity leave, it's very important to ask for a meeting with your supervisor and say, I'm delighted to be back. Here are my goals for the next 6 months and for the next 2 years. That way you have overcome the assumption that you're no longer committed. You've basically provided more information to overcome that stereotype. And there are strategies for navigating all 4 of these patterns, very concrete strategies. That's what we're proudest of in the book.
Okay, what would you say to the guys that are watching this, the men who are thinking, hey, this isn't about me, this is about women, I'm not sexist, I'm not biased. What's your message to them?
My message is that we interviewed 127 women for this book, and 96% of them reported one or more of these patterns of gender bias that they had encountered in their careers. And this is not all women on women. But what I would say to the men is you're lucky, because I'm just about to unveil a training that helps men help women overcome subtle gender bias. How are the men supposed to be interrupting this stuff if they don't know what it is? What I'm developing is a system of what I call bias interrupters to help male managers spot these subtle patterns and interrupt them in real time. Because I think a lot of men do want to be helpful and they just don't know how. They don't have the tools. We haven't given them the tools. That's what we need to do.
Joan, I hope to have you on again and talk about that aspect of all this another time. But for today, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks for your interest.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.